Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight you find yourself staring at a dim red horizon that isn't quite the desert outside your town, and isn't quite a dream either. The sky above you has a faint green smear that shouldn't be there, like somebody dragged a highlighter across the stars. That eerie glow belongs to 3I/ATLAS, the comet that wandered in from interstellar space and, without asking for permission, decided to make our neighbourhood its vacation spot. It glitters like a guest who might not leave quietly, and for a moment, you have to admit, you probably won't survive this if it came anywhere near Mars. But don't panic yet. The atmosphere of tonight's story is gentle, drifting like the slow hum of a ceiling fan. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where these little sleepy expeditions are reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift closer to the comet, floating in imagination as though weightless. Its coma, the halo of evaporating gases, expands like the fuzzy aura of a dream you can't hold on to. Scientists named it 3I/ATLAS, because it was the third confirmed interstellar object after the infamous Oumuamua and Borisov. Each arrival feels like the universe mailing us an envelope without a return address. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures would have seen these streaks as omens of doom or just exciting sky fireworks, but either way, your inner caveman brain whispers, big light in sky equals bad news. The weird part? This one shines green. That's the result of diatomic carbon glowing under ultraviolet sunlight, like the comet is wearing neon glow sticks from a rave 2 billion years late. Fringe theorists online already joke that it's alien graffiti, but deep down you know it's just chemistry, very pretty, very spooky chemistry. You let yourself imagine what it must look like from the surface of Mars. The planet has no thick blue blanket of air to scatter the view, just a rusty ceiling so thin that stars cut through like needles. From that vantage, a TLAS would blaze sharp and merciless, dragging its shimmering tail across the horizon, like an afterthought of creation. You shuffle forward in this vision, boots crunching dust that smells like nothing, because Mars has no breathable air to carry scents. A green glow paints the rocks, and the silence is so complete it feels loud. That silence makes you think of another time, 1066, when Halley's Comet blazed over England. Chroniclers claimed it terrified the people before the Norman invasion. Historians still argue whether they genuinely believed it foretold doom, or whether monks just liked adding dramatic footnotes to already messy politics. Either way, comets have been stealing the show long before Instagram filters. One stray thought clings like Martian dust. Why does interstellar matter feel so much more ominous? You've seen dozens of comets sweep by, their eccentric orbits like circus tricks around the sun. But this one doesn't belong. It came from another star system, a stranger crashing the party, bringing who knows what chemical cocktails. Fringe whispers suggest such visitors might even ferry alien microbes, hitchhikers frozen in the ice. The official line? Almost certainly not. The unofficial vibe? You really wouldn't want to lick it to check. You let your mind wander with a sly smile. Imagine if Mars, already a planet humans keep poking with rovers like a sleeping cat, became the direct target of a cosmic snowball fired from interstellar space. Not a guaranteed apocalypse, but enough to make any mission planner double-check their insurance policies. If you've ever worried about your neighbour's tree leaning toward your fence, picture that, but scaled up to celestial proportions. As you drift in this reverie, you notice the comet doesn't rush. Its orbit is lazy by human reckoning, taking months to reveal new details. Astronomers sip their coffee, adjust their telescopes, and argue over whether its trajectory might brush close enough to Mars to justify sweaty palms. The debate sounds strangely like gossip. It's just passing through. No, it's heading right for drama. Somewhere in the data, numbers carry the weight of destiny. But here in your sleepy head, the numbers dissolve into colours. The green halo bright, the black void darker than anything back home. Your eyelids grow heavy, like shutters closing against too much cosmic light. The comet keeps drifting, a silent intruder, and you keep walking through Martian dust, the soundless world beneath you waiting for what comes next. You keep walking through the powdery Martian dust, and the glow of 3I/ATLAS above you feels less like a light show and more like a reminder. You're not at the centre of anything. This thing isn't even from your solar system. It wandered for millions of years, maybe billions, through the gulfs between stars before casually brushing against the sun's gravity. You tilt your head back, watching its tail feather outward, and you realise this is a comet not from here, an immigrant from the deep dark. There's something unnerving about interstellar visitors. Regular comets are already dramatic enough. They swoop in on eccentric orbits, flare up, then retreat like pyrotechnic introverts, but they still belong to our family. Their orbits trace back to the Oort cloud, that icy halo surrounding the solar system like a messy storage attic. Interstellar ones? They're strangers. They don't circle back. They just pass through, leaving astronomers scrambling with notebooks and telescopes like neighbours trying to photograph a celebrity sighting. Remember when Oumuamua zipped through in 2017? The elongated object sparked a wave of speculation because it didn't behave quite like a comet or an asteroid. It didn't have a visible tail, and yet it accelerated in a way that hinted at outgassing. Historians still argue whether future textbooks will call it first confirmed interstellar visitor, or that time everyone thought aliens sent a space cigar. And then, as if the cosmos enjoyed suspense, Comet Borisov arrived in 2019, behaving much more like a textbook comet, tail and all. Two visitors in such quick succession made scientists rethink how often stellar neighbourhoods actually bump elbows, and now 3I/ATLAS, green, theatrical, dramatic, and carrying with it that unsettling question: what if these aren't just cosmic tourists? What if they sometimes crash into planets along the way? You shift your gaze toward Mars, a planet that has always been humanity's projection screen. War god, canal-covered oasis, dead desert, maybe future colony. Mars wears every role humans assign to it. So of course your imagination jumps to the worst-case scenario. What if ATLAS and Mars meet not as casual acquaintances, but as participants in a violent cosmic handshake? There's a quirky tidbit here too. Ancient Chinese astronomers once described comets as broom stars, sweeping across the heavens to clear away misfortune. You glance at the glowing tail and chuckle at the idea of Mars getting dusted by a broom the size of a small mountain. Maybe that's one way to handle terraforming. Just sweep hard enough until the surface looks new. But then your rational side kicks in. The odds of a direct hit are vanishingly small. Space is mostly emptiness, and even in the relatively tight neighbourhood of Mars' orbit, the math says close passes are more common than collisions. Still, your brain doesn't like low odds when the stakes are planetary. That's the same brain that worries about shark attacks despite only swimming in chlorinated pools. You imagine scientists on Earth poring over orbital plots, adjusting tiny decimals in the trajectory, each decimal shifting futures you can't yet touch. A single miscalculation could mean headlines like "Close Approach" morph into "Historic Impact," and you think about how our ancestors used to interpret these very streaks of light as divine warnings. Maybe they weren't wrong to feel the dread, even if their explanations lacked astrophysics. The instinctive shiver is universal. Strangers from the dark are rarely invited in. Standing there on your imaginary Martian ridge, you feel a weird mix of awe and suspicion. The comet is beautiful, its glow hypnotic, but it's also a reminder of how porous cosmic borders are. If rocks and ice can cross between stars, maybe other things can too. Life, spores, or, in less romantic terms, problems. Historians still argue whether panspermia, the idea that life travels on comets, has real evidence behind it, or whether it belongs in the fun but unlikely category. For now, it's just another bedtime story told by the cosmos, dangling possibilities like constellations you can't quite connect. You sigh, shoulders sinking, because really, you have no control here. The comet will do what it does, Mars will wear whatever scars it's given, and Earth will keep peeking nervously through its telescopes. All you can do is watch the stranger pass by glowing green against the infinite dark, and wonder how long it'll stay before vanishing forever into the night between suns. Your boots crunch softly in the Martian soil as the sky continues to burn with that emerald glow, and for the first time your sleepy imagination stops treating Atlas like a tourist and starts treating it like a threat. Mars, the unlucky target. It's not that the comet has a personal vendetta. It's not whispering to itself, "That red planet looks tasty." No, it's just gravity, geometry, and chance. But if the dice roll wrong, Mars becomes the chalkboard, where the universe scribbles one of its nastier equations. You picture the orbital diagrams astronomers draw, swooping ellipses, parabolic arcs, neat intersections. On paper, it looks so tidy. In reality, it's like a cosmic game of bumper cars played over millions of miles. Mars, forever drifting on its 687-day path around the Sun, might just find itself at the wrong place at the wrong time. There's an eerie familiarity here. In 2014, another comet, Siding Spring, passed dangerously close to Mars, closer than the Moon is to Earth. NASA had to reposition its orbiters, tucking them behind the planet for protection from debris. Historians still argue whether this was a turning point in public awareness about planetary vulnerability, or just a footnote that most people ignored because Netflix released something shinier that week. Either way, the memory lingers like static. Mars has already had near misses, now add an interstellar twist. Atlas isn't just a backyard comet. It's a visitor carrying momentum from light years away. That makes its trajectory harder to predict, its materials less familiar, and its potential effects more unsettling. You find yourself imagining Mars taking the direct hit, a frozen bullet smashing into the thin atmosphere and cracking the surface like a porcelain plate. And here's a quirky tidbit. In the 19th century, Percival Lowell convinced himself that Mars had irrigation canals built by advanced civilizations. If he were alive now, he'd probably be pacing nervously, wondering if 3I/TLAS would wash away his imaginary Martian suburbs. You grin at the thought of little green gardeners holding up umbrellas as comet fragments rain down. But even your smirk fades when you consider the odds stacked against Mars. Unlike Earth, with its thick cushion of atmosphere and oceans that act as shock absorbers, Mars is naked. A rock the size of a house would punch a crater deep into its crust. A comet nucleus several kilometers across. That's rewriting landscapes, stirring dust storms that could last for decades and maybe, just maybe, melting enough subsurface ice to flood valleys not touched by water in eons. The scary part isn't just the damage, it's the silence afterward. No emergency broadcasts, no cleanup crews, no Mars Aid concerts with rock stars strumming guitars for donations. Mars just absorbs the blow without complaint, and the only witnesses are a handful of robot rovers who can't even scream. You picture poor Curiosity squinting its camera at a green-lit sky, trying to process what it sees with ones and zeros. Historians still argue whether catastrophic impacts should be seen as purely destructive or as strange opportunities. Earth's own history shows that giant impacts sometimes reset the board, wiping out dominant life forms and leaving room for newcomers. Mars doesn't have that problem anymore. It's already barren, a world on pause, but what if an interstellar strike jolted it back into some kind of activity? Heated underground aquifers, geysers venting into the sky, chemical reactions brewing where they've been dormant for billions of years. Could a disaster be the thing that gives Mars its second chance? You let that possibility swirl in your drowsy mind. Mars as the unlucky target, yes, but maybe also Mars as the accidental laboratory. A stage for the universe to test its wilder scripts. A cosmic roll of the dice where destruction and creation blur together, leaving you with that uneasy sense that the line between threat and opportunity is always thinner than you'd like. You tuck that thought into the back of your brain like a folded note under a pillow, and keep walking under the comet's glow, wondering how close the encounter will really come. Your steps drag a little now, Martian dust clinging to your boots in slow motion as if even gravity wants you to hesitate. You raise your eyes again to the emerald streak of 3I/ATLAS, and suddenly Mars's skin looks different to you. Pitted, battered, scarred. Every crater is a memory, a fossilized bruise. The unlucky target you just pictured has already lived through countless blows. It's almost unfair. Mars looks like a world that tried to heal but never got the chance. Craters are everywhere here, from tiny pits no wider than your kitchen table to yawning basins the size of countries. The most dramatic of all is Hellas Planitia, a depression over 1,400 miles wide and nearly 5 miles deep. One look at it and you know. Something once slammed Mars so hard it nearly turned the planet inside out. Historians still argue whether the impact that made Hellas was responsible for tipping Mars slightly on its axis, changing the climate forever, or whether the tilt was just part of the planet's natural wobble. Either way, the scars tell you Mars has always been a punching bag in the solar system's cosmic gym. You remember Earth has its own history of impacts. The Chicxulub crater in Mexico, for instance, the one tied to the dinosaur extinction 66 million years ago. On Earth, erosion and plate tectonics hide many of those old wounds. Mars, though, Mars keeps every receipt. Its surface is like an untouched crime scene, recording each violent visitor in permanent ink. And here's your quirky tidbit. One crater on Mars, named Stickney, sits on the tiny moon Phobos and looks almost comically oversized. It's like Phobos got walloped with a frying pan and somehow didn't shatter into gravel. Some scientists suggest that if Phobos ever breaks apart under Mars gravity, its debris could rain down in a spectacular planetary ring. Imagine sitting here with your sleepy boots in the dust, watching a moon crumble into a halo. But as you walk, you can't help connecting the dots between the past and the present. Every crater you pass is proof that what you fear tonight has already happened, countless times. Atlas isn't a new problem, it's just the latest candidate for a very old audition. Historians still argue whether most of Mars's atmosphere was blasted away by repeated impacts, or by the slow nibbling of the solar wind. The truth may be a messy combination, but the end result is the same. A thin, fragile air that couldn't protect against a sneeze, much less a comet. You pause at the rim of a particularly sharp crater, your helmet visor fogging slightly as though your imagination wants to mimic breath. You imagine the fireball that created this pit, the streak of light, the thunderless explosion, the mushroom cloud of dust and shattered rock rising in silence above a planet with no one to scream. The dust would settle eventually, and the crater would remain, a bowl for starlight, waiting for another lonely night. The funny part? Humanity once mistook some of these craters for volcanoes. Early telescopic sketches depicted Mars as a volcanic world, belching like a chain smoker. It took spacecraft flybys in the 1960s to reveal the truth. Impact scars outnumber volcanic scars by far. Mars wasn't erupting, it was being pelted, like a boxer who never got to throw enough punches back. The green comet overhead makes those scars look fresh, like bruises under fluorescent light. You wonder if future explorers, if they ever step here for real, will stand at the edges of these craters and feel the same unease you do now. The uneasy knowledge that Mars has always been in harm's way, and that one day another strike might carve its name into the surface all over again. You walk on, hearing nothing but your own phantom steps, carrying with you the echo of every violent memory written across this planet's face. Your boots slide down the slope of that ancient crater, and you realize something about Mars. It's naked. No thick protective blanket like Earth has, no blue dome of nitrogen and oxygen to slow incoming fire. Mars's atmosphere is more like a ghost. Thin, fragile whisper light. If you were to scoop it into a jar, it would barely register, like trying to catch fog in a net. That thin Martian air makes the prospect of a comet strike feel both inevitable and catastrophic. On Earth, meteors often burn up in fiery streaks. The atmosphere acts like a planetary bouncer, vaporizing most of the riffraff before they can crash the party. Mars doesn't have that luxury. Its air is just 1% as dense as Earth's, which means even modest space rocks can plow straight through and punch holes into the crust. Imagine throwing a pebble into tissue paper. That's the difference scale you're dealing with. Historians still argue whether Mars once had a much denser atmosphere that could have cushioned such blows. Some point to evidence of ancient river valleys, suggesting a warm or wet world. Others argue the water may have come from underground bursts or brief localized heating after impacts. Either way, you're standing on a planet that lost its protective armor long ago. It's been walking around the solar system naked, and comets like Atlas are the rude paparazzi. You tilt your head back again, gazing at that green glow, and let yourself imagine the impact in slow motion. Atlas descends, slamming into the air so thin it barely slows, a faint trail marking where molecules are ripped apart. Then, bam! Ground contact. The energy released would dwarf every nuclear weapon on Earth, but instead of mushroom clouds and fallout, you'd get dust. Endless choking dust. Mars's atmosphere isn't thick enough to carry thunderstorms of fire, but it is just dense enough to turn pulverized rock into a global haze. A world already red would turn darker, dimmer, colder, like a lantern with its flame smothered. Quirky tidbit time. In 1783, a massive meteor exploded over the English town of Hessel, showering stones onto rooftops. People panicked, and some thought the fragments were cursed objects hurled by angry gods. If that minor Earthside event caused chaos, Imagine humanity's reaction to watching Mars, their dream colony, turn into a chalkboard smeared with comet dust. Twitter would have a field day. Memes of RIP Mars would circulate before the dust even settled. But back in your imagination, you're not scrolling memes. You're watching the sky fill with particles, each tiny grain lingering because there isn't enough weather to wash it away. On Earth, rain clears the air, winds swirl the haze. Mars doesn't have that kind of muscle. Its dust storms can rage for months, even years. Add the aftershock of an interstellar impact, and you get a planet that might vanish from sight entirely, cloaked in its own powdered remains. Historians still argue whether dust storms alone were enough to kill off early robotic missions like Opportunity, or if mechanical age played the bigger role. What they agree on, though, is that dust is Mars' most insidious weapon. With Atlas as the trigger, the dust would become planetary-scale camouflage, hiding craters beneath swirling veils. You shuffle forward in your thoughts, picturing rovers trapped under a sunless sky, solar panels starved, instruments clicking away in the darkness until silence claims them. No audience but the sand, and high above, that thin atmosphere breathes one long shallow sigh, too weak to resist, too quiet to matter. The comet keeps glowing green, taunting you, and the planet beneath your boots feels smaller than ever, fragile, exposed and waiting. You let your gaze linger on that emerald intruder, and suddenly your sleepy imagination zooms in, closer, closer, until you're not standing on Mars anymore but floating alongside the comet itself. Up close, 3I/ATLAS doesn't look smooth or noble. It looks like a craggy snowball that's been kicked around a parking lot. Jagged ridges, pits that swallow shadows, cliffs of frozen gases waiting for the sunlight. Dust, ice, and chaos. That's all a comet really is, and yet somehow it holds the power to reshape worlds. The sun's heat is already teasing particles from a TLAS surface, jets of vapor bursting like geysers and spraying debris into space. Each fragment joins the shimmering tail, millions of tiny rocks and snowflakes trailing like confetti from a party you're not sure you wanted an invitation to. You picture that confetti cloud sweeping past Mars, sprinkling its surface with a rain of grit and ice. No dramatic Hollywood explosion, just a steady sandblasting that could still rattle orbiters and pepper the ground. And here's a fun fringe tidbit. In the 1600s, some scientists believed comets literally caused plagues by shedding poisonous dust into Earth's air. Totally unscientific, but you can see how the logic felt comforting. Blame sickness on something dramatic in the sky. Watching Atlas spew out its debris, you can almost imagine ancient people nodding wisely saying, "See? There's your cosmic sneeze right there." Historians still argue whether comets were more feared for their physical potential to strike or for their symbolic disruption. In some cultures, they meant famine, in others, the death of kings. You smirk at the thought. If Atlas rained its tail on Mars today, there wouldn't be a king to worry about, just robots that don't care about omens, unless of course their programming gets scrambled by static from comet dust. Then maybe they'd start reciting Shakespeare in binary. You drift down again, feet crunching back onto the Martian regolith. Imagine that shower of material reaching this thin air. Mars's atmosphere wouldn't burn up most of it. It would let it through. Pebbles would streak to the ground, popping tiny craters everywhere like freckles across the landscape. Ice particles might vaporize, briefly thickening the atmosphere with ghostly fog. The chemical mix, carbon compounds, water, maybe even ammonia, could fall into the soil, a cosmic seasoning sprinkled on an otherwise bland desert. Quirky fact, some researchers suggest Earth's oceans may have been topped up by comets long ago, their icy deliveries adding to what volcanoes belched. If that's true, then comets aren't just troublemakers, they're caterers, bringing water and organics to starving planets. You look around at Mars and can't help thinking, maybe a little chaos is exactly what it needs, but the chaotic part is the unpredictability. Dust grains follow magnetic fields, sunlight pressure, tiny nudges from the solar wind. They don't behave like obedient soldiers, they behave like toddlers scattering Lego bricks across a floor. Historians still argue whether Atlas's tail could actually intersect Mars's orbit, or if that's just a scary what-if. You decide not to do the math. You're too busy imagining stepping outside your imaginary habitat, brushing fine green-tinted comet dust off your visor, muttering, "Great, now my spacesuit has glitter." And maybe that's the most unsettling image. Not the giant impact, not the catastrophic crater, but the slow rain of alien material, changing Mars molecule by molecule. No explosion, just a whisper of chaos that lingers, reshaping chemistry, rewriting possibilities, leaving you unsure whether you should be worried or excited. The comet keeps unraveling its tail, a silent parade across the void, and you can almost hear Mars itself holding its breath. You pause on that dusty Martian plain, brushing imaginary comet grit off your gloves, and a mischievous thought sneaks in. What if this wasn't just destruction? What if a hit from Atlas, or even just a good dusting, accidentally did the one thing humanity has been scheming about for decades? Terraforming by disaster. Mars, the red rock nobody asked to babysit, suddenly forced into a makeover by a passing interstellar snowball. Terraforming usually sounds like a grand engineering project. Mirrors in orbit, greenhouse factories, machines puffing out gases like interplanetary humidifiers. It's the stuff of science fiction novels and PowerPoint slides. But comets? They carry the very ingredients we'd need. Water ice, carbon dioxide, ammonia, organics. A solid strike could melt vast amounts of subsurface ice, releasing water vapor and thickening the atmosphere in ways no human bulldozer could match. The chaos would be violent, yes, but also effective, like smashing a frozen dinner into a microwave and hoping it comes out edible. There's historical precedent in how we think about cosmic accidents. Remember Tunguska in 1908? A comet fragment or asteroid exploded over Siberia, flattening trees across 800 square miles. Historians still argue whether it was cometary ice or rocky asteroid, but either way, that single event unleashed energy on par with the largest hydrogen bombs. Now imagine that kind of impact, not over a forest, but on a planet already desperate for a climate upgrade. And here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, Carl Sagan actually mused about deliberately nudging comets into Mars to jumpstart terraforming. It sounds wild, but he wasn't joking. He thought a few carefully aimed ice bombs could thicken the air, warm the ground, and maybe even restart a water cycle. The fringe corners of the internet love to point out that nature might do it for us, no tugboats required. Of course, the big debate: would it work, or would it just turn Mars into a global disaster zone? Historians still argue whether adding greenhouse gases to Mars would actually stabilize temperatures or just trigger unpredictable feedbacks. Some climate models suggest a brief warm-up followed by a colder deep freeze, the atmosphere venting to space faster than we could refill it. It's the equivalent of throwing a party and realizing your house has no roof. The music's fun until the rain comes in. You picture it anyway. Atlas slams down, vaporizing ice, boiling chemicals into the sky. The thin air thickens with carbon dioxide and steam. Dust storms swirl darker, but amid the haze, pressure slowly creeps upward. Pools of briny water form in craters, bubbling with the faintest suggestion of habitability. For a moment, maybe a decade, maybe a century, Mars breathes again. And then, maybe, it doesn't. The gases escape, the pools freeze, and the dream ends. But what a strange, poetic possibility. A comet that was never meant to stop here accidentally becoming the first terraform engineer. You lean back in your dusty boots, smirking at the thought. Imagine Elon Musk's reaction. Years of rocket launches planned, endless debates about domes and habitats, then one green comet comes along and does the job in a weekend, albeit messily. A cosmic contractor working on commission from chaos itself. The glow of a TLAS above you feels different now. Less like a predator, more like a wild card. A visitor carrying disaster, yes, but also maybe a chance. And as the silence of Mars stretches out around you, you let yourself wonder. Maybe destruction and creation are just two sides of the same comet tail, drifting quietly across a red sky. Your boots scuff the dust again, and you can't help but laugh under your breath. The idea of Mars being terraformed by accident is wild enough. But of course, the human brain doesn't stop at physics. It reaches for myth, for story, for that twitchy itch that says, this means something. And so the old Martian myths rekindle, sparked not by telescopes this time, but by the shimmering ghost of 3I/a TLAS drifting green across the sky. You think back to Percival Lowell and his infamous Martian canals. In the late 1800s, he convinced himself, through a mix of fuzzy optics and vivid imagination, that Mars had an intricate irrigation system built by intelligent beings desperately trying to survive a dying world. Historians still argue whether Lowell truly believed his sketches, or whether he was just charmed by the romance of cosmic neighbours. Either way, he planted a seed that sprouted into everything from pulp magazines to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Now imagine how Lowell's ghost would react to the green comet's approach. Would he nod solemnly, whispering, yes, the Martians called it to themselves? Or would he sketch new canals, this time charting the path of ATLAS itself across his dusty dream world? You smirk, because that's the kind of human leap we make every time the cosmos sends us something unfamiliar. We turn it into a character in our story. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 1938, Orson Welles' radio adaptation of War of the Worlds convinced some listeners that Martians were actually invading New Jersey. People panicked, packed cars, called the police. If a fictional broadcast could cause that much chaos, imagine the chatter if NASA ever hinted that an interstellar comet might actually collide with Mars. Fringe theorists would have a buffet. It's not a comet, it's a ship. The green glow is camouflage. They're not hitting Mars, they're landing. You walk across the Martian plain, dust hissing around your ankles, and the sky looks like a stage for exactly that kind of story. Atlas, glowing with otherworldly green, becomes a cosmic flare gun, and Mars, with its barren silence, becomes the perfect canvas for imagination. It doesn't fight back, it doesn't contradict, it just sits there letting humans paint their myths across its rusty surface. Historians still argue whether myths like these serve as coping mechanisms, ways to manage cosmic dread, or whether they're just the side effect of curiosity bumping into the unknown. Either way, you know one thing. Humanity never lets a good sky event pass without a story, and maybe, deep down, we want it. Maybe it's comforting to imagine Martians rebuilding canals under comet light, or green visitors waving at us from the dust. Because the alternative, that Mars is just a cold, indifferent rock about to get whacked again, is too lonely a bedtime story. You let the silence stretch as you picture it. Atlas sweeping overhead, myths weaving themselves like cobwebs, and the planet below wearing them quietly like hand-me-down clothes it never asked for. You pause, rubbing the fine Martian grit between your gloves, and tilt your head toward the faint blue dot rising over the horizon, Earth. Suddenly the comet doesn't feel like Mars's problem alone, because if 3I/ATLAS can take aim at the red planet, what's to stop the dice from landing on us next time? Earth gets nervous too. It's people staring upward at a visitor that couldn't care less about orbital borders. There's a familiar twitch in the human psyche when comets show up. It's not just science, it's survival instinct. We live on a planet that's been punched before. The Chicxulub impact 66 million years ago rewrote the biological script, clearing the stage for mammals to eventually crawl out and invent Wi-Fi. Historians still argue whether the extinction was immediate apocalypse or a drawn-out collapse, but either way, the rock from space left its mark. A green comet glowing in the sky is a reminder that the lottery is still running, and our ticket is still in the bowl. You let your imagination stretch farther. What if Atlas had veered just a little closer to Earth instead of Mars? No need for a direct hit, just a tail brushing our atmosphere. Satellites fried, GPS scrambled, radio static humming through the night. Planes rerouted, power grids buzzing like angry bees, civilization hiccuping because a snowball from another star decided to leave glitter in our sky. And here's your quirky tidbit. In 1910, when Earth passed through Halley's Comet's tail, newspapers spread rumours that cyanogen gas in the tail would poison everyone. Opportunists sold comet pills and bottled comet protection elixirs. People bought them because fear sells faster than facts. You can almost hear the same thing happening now. Miracle filters for your home, supplements that claim to detox interstellar particles. Mars might be the unlucky target, but Earth is always the nervous neighbour buying snake oil. You picture yourself back on Earth for a moment, scrolling through frantic headlines. The word interstellar makes people twitch. It sounds alien, unfamiliar, ominous. Astronomers calmly explain orbital mechanics, probabilities, safe distances. Fringe theorists post blurry photos with captions like, "Look closer." Meanwhile, the average person just wants to know if they should cancel their weekend barbecue. Historians still argue whether public panic during sky events helps societies take space seriously, or just fuels more mistrust in science. But here on Mars, under Atlas's glow, the nervousness feels heavier. If Earth is watching, it's not just for Mars' sake, it's for our own rehearsal. Mars may take the blow this time, but Earth knows it's standing in line at the same cosmic roulette wheel, and suddenly, your little blue home, rising faintly over the horizon, looks fragile in a way you can't quite put into words. You sigh into your visor, dust swirling at your boots, and wonder which planet is really the unlucky one. Mars for being in the path, or Earth for realizing how easily it could have been us. You kick a pebble across the dust and watch it arc lazily in the thin Martian gravity. It feels like a metaphor for everything you're thinking about. The randomness, the lack of control. That's the heart of it, isn't it? The cosmic coin toss. Every orbit, every comet, every impact is a gamble played out over billions of years, with planets as the chips on the table. Astronomers try to tame the chaos with equations. They chart trajectories, plug in velocity, mass, eccentricity. They spin simulations on supercomputers, predicting where a comet might be tomorrow, next year, next century. But space is messy. Tiny forces add up: solar wind, outgassing jets, gravitational nudges from passing planets. A pebble kicked the wrong way can change futures. Historians still argue whether we'll ever be able to forecast long-term impact risks with confidence, or whether uncertainty is just baked into the system. You picture 3I/ATLAS, tumbling along, shedding dust like breadcrumbs, every speck altering its path by fractions too small to measure. The comet doesn't know where it's going. It isn't aiming, it just rolls the dice, and Mars happens to be standing at the edge of the table. There's a quirky tidbit you remember. In 1773, the mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace argued that the universe is deterministic, that if we knew the exact position and velocity of every particle, we could predict the entire future. A bold claim. And yet here we are centuries later, still watching comets and shrugging, well, maybe it'll miss. Laplace would be furious to know that dust jets from a dirty snowball make his neat equations wobble like jello. You let yourself imagine a cosmic casino, galaxies as chandeliers, planets rolling like dice across velvet tables. The dealer, gravity, doesn't cheat, but it doesn't care either. Mars, Earth, Atlas, all just players with no say in the stakes. The coin spins, the wheel turns, and once in a while a world gets smacked hard enough to rewrite its history. Historians still argue whether it's better for civilizations to dwell on that randomness or to ignore it. Some say constant awareness fuels innovation. Asteroid defense systems, impact simulations, planetary insurance. Others think it breeds paranoia, turning every glowing streak into a prophecy of doom. You can see both sides as you stand here on Mars, staring up at the green light and feeling both awe and unease. The funny part, for all the supercomputers, all the telescopes, the cosmic coin toss still feels like something you flip in your palm. Heads, Atlas sails harmlessly past, leaving us with pretty pictures. Tails, it collides with Mars, carving new scars into the dust. You can almost hear the clink of the coin in the silence, spinning, spinning, waiting to fall. And you, a tiny figure on this vast red desert, can only wait to see how it lands. You trudge along the ridge, the faint green shimmer still tracing its way across the Martian sky, and your thoughts drift earthward again, not to panicked headlines this time, but to dimly lit cafes where scientists sit hunched over laptops, arguing in whispers over mugs of coffee that went cold 2 hours ago. Scientists argue in late cafes, and you're sitting there with them in your imagination, eavesdropping on debates that sound like equal parts physics seminar and jazz improv. One astrophysicist insists ATLAS is harmless, just another interstellar tourist waving as it passes. Another frowns and mutters about non-gravitational accelerations, about the possibility of outgassing changing its path. A third stirs their coffee so hard it nearly sloshes, declaring, "We've underestimated comets before." The air is thick with equations scribbled on napkins, half-baked simulations on glowing screens, and the kind of nervous humour people use when the stakes are too big to laugh at directly. Historians still argue whether scientists help calm the public during cosmic scares or accidentally fan the flames by speaking in cautious maybes. It's probably fine doesn't sound very reassuring when the alternative is a planetary crater. You smirk, imagining one astronomer trying to order pie, while another insists on calculating probabilities to the fourth decimal. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Back in 1910, when Earth passed through Halley's comet's tail, French astronomer Camille Flammarion confidently declared that cyanogen gas from the comet would penetrate Earth's atmosphere and possibly snuff out all life. Spoiler, it didn't, but his statement caused a small market for comet protective umbrellas. You picture modern scientists rolling their eyes, knowing that today's equivalent would be TikTok filters and survivalist YouTube channels promising 3I/A ATLAS-proof bunkers. You lean back in your imaginary cafe chair, sipping an espresso that somehow tastes like Martian dust, and watch the debate continue. Someone points out that a direct hit on Mars could, theoretically, liberate buried water, altering the planet's climate for decades. Someone else snaps that such speculation is irresponsible. Fuel for internet hysteria. The room hums with tension, the kind that comes when no one can prove the future one way or another. And that's the thing. Science thrives on uncertainty, but humans hate it. We want yes or no, safe or doomed, green comet as friend or enemy. Instead, the best we get is a shrug, a maybe, an orbital plot with a margin of error that keeps everyone awake a little too long. You smile at the absurdity of it all. A cafe full of brilliant minds, centuries of astronomy, satellites circling the Earth, and still, the universe keeps a few secrets. Still, a glowing speck of dust and ice from another star can spark all-night debates. And here you are, half asleep in your Martian boots, listening to the hum of voices that don't know any more than you do about how this story ends. The cafe voices fade from your imagination, and you're back on the Martian plain, where the silence is so deep it makes your ears ring. You squint at 3i/ATLAS, burning green overhead, and a thought drifts in like static from an old radio. We've been here before, not with this comet, not with this planet, but with the fear. When history rhymes, it doesn't whisper, it streaks across the sky like a glowing scar, reminding you that humanity has always been nervous about visitors from the void. Take the Great Comet of 1680, for example. It was so bright it could be seen in daylight, and preachers in Europe thundered that it signalled divine wrath. Historians still argue whether those sermons genuinely terrified entire congregations, or whether the drama was just good theatre to fill pews. Either way, the comet became less of an astronomical event and more of a moral lesson. Fast forward to 1910 again, when Halley's Comet sent people into a frenzy. Snake oil salesmen made a fortune on comet gas masks. Farmers buried jars of food, convinced the sky itself might poison their crops. Some even painted their windows black, as if they could shut out the apocalypse with enough coats of tar. Quirky tidbit: a French entrepreneur sold tickets for people to ride in comet-proof submarines. He didn't have submarines, of course, just the nerve to pocket the money and disappear. Now, watching Atlas above Mars, you realise it's the same rhythm, a new verse. Humanity doesn't change much, we just swap pulpits for podcasts, street sermons for live streams. Historians still argue whether these sky panics push science forward by forcing better telescopes, tighter calculations, or whether they just expose our tendency to mythologise what we don't control, probably both. You smirk, imagining what people centuries from now might say about this era. Will they laugh at our memes of green comets photoshopped into UFOs? Or will they shake their heads at how close we came to real disaster while half the population was too busy scrolling past cat videos? Mars stays silent through it all, carrying its own history of bombardment. Its craters are like history books written in stone, each one a reminder that impacts aren't just hypotheticals. Here, the rhyme isn't just cultural, it's carved into the ground. Every dent in the crust says, this has happened, it will happen again. You shuffle your boots, kicking a little dust, and feel the echo of all those old fears mixing with the glow above you. The comet is both omen and object, both story and stone, and the rhyme keeps repeating, century after century, planet after planet, as if the cosmos enjoys playing the same song in different keys. Your steps carry you into a shallow valley, where the shadows stretch long and soft, and for a moment you almost forget the comet. But then you glance up, and there it is again, a green smear across the sky, like a reminder written in glowing ink. And that's when another thought hits you. Not about people, not about myths, but about the little machines we've left here. Robots in harm's way, stranded on a silent planet that might be about to get sandblasted by interstellar debris. You imagine Curiosity trundling slowly along a ridge, its wheels chewing at the soil, its cameras panning toward the strange glow. Perseverance parked at Jezero Crater, pausing mid-sample like a chef interrupted mid-recipe. Even Ingenuity, if it were still fluttering its tiny rotor blades, would glance skyward, as if a drone could feel unease. These rovers aren't alive, not really, but you've given them personalities in your mind. They're explorers, pioneers, and now perhaps potential victims. There's precedent for robotic fragility. In 2004, Europe's Beagle 2 lander reached Mars but failed to fully deploy its solar panels. For years it was presumed lost, until images revealed it lying silent on the surface like a toy dropped in the sand. Historians still argue whether its failure was an engineering flaw or just the unlucky hand Mars so often deals. Either way, the lesson is clear. Mars doesn't forgive mistakes, even tiny ones. Now add Atlas to the mix, dust raining down, debris streaking through the thin atmosphere. A direct hit isn't necessary, just a cloud of comet fragments could be enough to scratch lenses, clog instruments, or blanket solar panels in alien powder. The rovers would choke slowly, their data streams fading, their mechanical hearts beating softer until silence swallowed them. Here's a quirky tidbit. When Spirit, one of the early rovers, got stuck in soft soil in 2009, NASA engineers tried everything, tilting wheels, rolling backward, even simulating Martian sandpits back on Earth. In the end, Spirit became a stationary science platform until it finally went silent. People mourned like they'd lost a pet. Imagine that grief multiplied if comet dust snuffed out all of Mars' robotic emissaries at once. You smirk at the absurdity. Scientists holding candlelight vigils for machines, writing elegies for perseverance in binary. But beneath the humour is something tender. We've given these robots names, voices, Twitter accounts. They've become our surrogates on a planet too hostile for our fragile bodies. And now they stand quietly beneath Atlas's glow, waiting for whatever fate the sky decides to deliver. Historians still argue whether future archaeologists, maybe human, maybe not, will find these robots and view them as relics of our first fumbling steps into space, or as toys abandoned by a species that didn't stick around long enough to finish what it started. Either way, the idea of them facing a cosmic storm alone tugs at you in a way that feels strangely personal. You let your imagination linger there. A silent Martian plane, a green comet overhead, and a handful of machines humming bravely against the dark. Tiny outposts of human hope bracing themselves against the chaos of the universe. You climb out of that valley and pause on a rocky rise, your visor reflecting the faint shimmer above. The comet looks brighter now, its tail stretching like a phosphorescent brushstroke across the Martian night. Red skies, strange nights, the kind you'd never forget if you were actually here. Even in your drowsy imagination, the scene is unsettling, beautiful, and a little too quiet. Mars already has a reputation for weird skies. Because its atmosphere is so thin and dusty, sunsets glow blue instead of red. The opposite of Earth, as if the two planets decided to trade wardrobes. Historians still argue whether that subtle reversal is what first made Mars feel so uncanny to early skywatchers, or whether it was just the planet's blood-red hue. Either way, the sky here is strange, even without an interstellar comet painting neon across it. Now, imagine Atlas shedding material as it sweeps by, sprinkling the upper atmosphere with dust and ice. The nights would shimmer with green auroras, faint curtains rippling near the poles as particles slam into what little magnetic field Mars has left. You can see it now, rusty ground beneath your boots, overhead a ceiling gow of red haze streaked with emerald veils. A planet that already looked alien suddenly transformed into a light show no human festival could rival. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 1833, a Leonid meteor storm lit up Earth's skies with tens of thousands of shooting stars per hour. People woke in terror, convinced the world was ending. Others stood entranced, describing the heavens as a celestial fireworks display. You imagine the same thing happening here, except no one's around to gape or panic, just the rovers, their lenses recording streak after streak of glowing debris against the thin sky. You smirk, imagining Perseverance trying to tweet, "Mars sky tonight, # no filter, Atlas." Of course, its connection would probably fail mid-upload, leaving humanity forever curious about what its last snapshot might have shown. But not all the visions are pretty. You let yourself drift into the darker version, the dust storms kicked up by falling debris, red haze thickening until the world is cloaked in shadow. Nights without starlight, days dim and rust-coloured, silence pressing even harder than before. A planet that once teased with glimpses of habitability now wrapped in a global shroud. Historians still argue whether prolonged dust events could ever permanently change Mars' climate, or if they're just temporary veils. Either way, a comet shower could push the storms into overdrive, stretching strange nights into strange months, maybe years. You picture explorers in some future habitat, their windows blocked out by dust, their power dwindling, and their only view a faint emerald glow bleeding through the haze. The thought makes you shiver, though the Martian air outside is already cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide. You hug your arms across your chest and keep staring at the comet's trail, knowing that beauty and dread are always braided together in skies like these. You wander farther across the plain, boots crunching softly, and the thought creeps in again. What if it isn't just about dust or storms or craters? What if the real story is deeper, stranger, the paradox of life awakened or erased? Comets don't just destroy, sometimes they deliver. The green glow of 3I/TLAS makes you wonder which side of that paradox Mars might experience. On Earth, many scientists think comets played midwives to life. Their icy bodies carry water and organic molecules, carbon compounds, amino acid precursors, the chemistry kit you need to get biology rolling. Historians still argue whether most of Earth's oceans and building blocks came from comets, or whether volcanoes and asteroids did most of the heavy lifting. But the idea lingers, that frozen wanderers from the stars may have accidentally sprinkled the ingredients for our existence. So what about Mars? You imagine Atlas skimming by, its tail dust settling into cracks and craters, carrying molecules from another solar system. Alien chemistry, literally foreign. A few fragments might burrow into underground ice, creating little pockets where warmth and liquid water briefly coexist. Could that spark microbial rebirth? Could Mars go from sterile to simmering, not because of human machines, but because a comet decided to sneeze in its direction? Quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, a fringe scientist named Fred Hoyle seriously suggested that influenza outbreaks on Earth were triggered by comet-borne viruses drifting down through the atmosphere. Almost nobody bought the idea, but it stuck in popular imagination. You grin at the thought, Martian microbes, courtesy of ATLAS limited time offer. The marketing practically writes itself. Of course, there's the darker side of the paradox. If Mars ever did cling to hidden life, deep underground, hanging on in salty brines, a direct strike from ATLAS might snuff it out, sterilizing heat, shockwaves, toxic dust raining into aquifers, a fragile biosphere erased before we even confirmed it existed. Humanity's dream of discovering life on Mars could end not with a triumphant microscope photo, but with a crater big enough to bury the evidence. Historians still argue whether mass extinctions on Earth were cosmic accidents that cleared the stage for something better, or tragedies we were just lucky enough to survive. Either way, the lesson is harsh. Life is tough, but it's also terribly fragile. You sit on a rock in your imagination, watching Atlas glow brighter overhead, and let the paradox sink in. Life awakened, or life erased, both possibilities carried in the same dusty tail, in the same indifferent trajectory. Mars won't choose, the comet won't choose. The universe just rolls its dice, and you, a drowsy witness, are left to wonder which side will land face up. The sky above remains quiet, beautiful, and green, as if it already knows the answer and just isn't telling you yet. You stand, brushing the Martian dust from your gloves, and tilt your head back toward the comet again. Its glow feels less like a streak of light now and more like a message. Signals across the void. Of course it isn't trying to communicate. Atlas is just frozen gases and rock tumbling through gravity's invisible grip. But down on Earth, people are listening as if it might be whispering secrets. Astronomers beam radar signals toward it, measuring the bounce. Telescopes capture spectra, decoding which molecules are burning in its green haze. Data flows across fiber optic cables, pings off satellites, lands in labs where sleepy grad students squint at graphs with too much coffee in their veins. The comet doesn't notice, but humanity has turned it into a kind of cosmic news anchor. Every wavelength interpreted like subtitles from the void. Historians still argue whether Galileo's telescope was the true birth of modern astronomy, or just another link in a much older chain of sky watching. Either way, the pattern is clear. Every new tool we invent gets pointed upward, hungry for messages we're not sure how to read. You imagine Galileo here, peering at ATLAS, sketching frantically, muttering about how this one looks suspiciously greener than the rest. And here's a quirky tidbit. In 1977, a radio astronomer recorded the famous WOW signal, a strong, unexplained burst from deep space that lasted just 72 seconds. People still argue whether it was aliens, natural noise, or just earthly interference. You can't help but smirk at the thought, What if Atlas was carrying its own version of the wow signal, not as radio waves, but as molecules embedded in its dust waiting to scatter across Mars, an alien postcard delivered by ice? Back on Earth, the communication isn't just science, it's outreach. NASA, ESA, observatories across the globe push updates to Twitter, feeds, live streams, podcasts. They turn raw math into stories for the public. Don't worry, the odds of collision are tiny. Here's a simulation of the orbit. Here's what it would look like if it did hit. Scientists may argue in cafes, but they also know the world is watching. Every statement is a signal, not just across space, but across human communities. You let your imagination drift further. What if the comet itself is a kind of accidental message from another system? A fragment of another star's nursery, carrying with it the history of a place we'll never visit. Its dust is data, its tail a broadcast, its trajectory a telegram stamped with the laws of gravity. The signal is there. It's just up to us whether we can read it. The windless Martian night presses in around you, quiet as a radio dish pointed at the sky. The comet blazes green, a glowing line between planets and possibilities, and you realize, maybe the void has always been talking. We're just now learning how to listen. You lean back on the rock, gazing at Atlas streaking across the Martian sky, and for a moment you wonder how long it'll take before Earth does what Earth always does, grab the headline. Culture grabs the headline every time the cosmos throws a curveball. It doesn't matter if the science says low probability or harmless pass, the memes, the movies, the clickbait will run faster than any comet tail. Already you can picture it. News anchors standing in front of this green screen graphics, asking breathlessly, could Mars be doomed by an alien comet? YouTube thumbnails plastered with glowing red arrows and text in all caps. NASA hides the truth about 3I/ATLAS. TikTok creators dancing under fake green skies with captions like when the comet decides you're the unlucky planet. It's nothing new. Historians still argue whether Halley's comet panic of 1910 was fueled more by genuine fear or by newspapers looking to sell copy. In a way, it doesn't matter. The culture machine ran with it, just as it does now. The cosmos sends a snowball, humanity sends back a theatre production. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 1998, when the movies Armageddon and Deep Impact came out just months apart, both centered on catastrophic comet/asteroid strikes, NASA actually reported a spike in public interest in planetary defense. Popcorn and Bruce Willis turned into budget lines for telescopes. You chuckle, imagining what Hollywood would do with Atlas. Probably slap together a film called Emerald Doom, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, piloting a spaceship armed with laser drills. Back on Mars, though, there's no audience, just you, a silent sky, and a handful of robots humming softly. Yet you know Earth is watching through its screens, making jokes, spinning narratives. In living rooms and message boards, Atlas isn't just a comet, it's a metaphor. Some see it as a warning about climate change, others as proof of alien intentions, still others as a reminder to live your best life while you can. Historians still argue whether cultural responses to cosmic events actually help people cope or just distract from the real science. But in your drowsy imagination, it doesn't really matter. The comet has already become more than itself. It's no longer just frozen gas and dust, it's a character in Earth's stories, a symbol draped in green light. You smirk at the absurdity. The universe throws a dice roll and humans answer with hashtags, think pieces, and streaming deals. Somewhere in the silence of space, you imagine the comet sighing, "I was just passing through, guys. Chill." But that's how we work. Culture grabs the headline because stories help us sleep at night, even if the sky itself is wide awake. The glow of Atlas still paints the horizon, but your thoughts grow quieter now, softer, drifting into the idea that maybe all of this fuss, all the debates, the headlines, the memes, is one-sided. Because Mars itself? Mars doesn't care. Mars' patient silence is the real soundtrack here, and it feels almost mocking in its indifference. You stare at the landscape around you. Craters gape like old wounds, valleys stretch for hundreds of miles, volcanoes tower higher than Everest, and none of it stirs at the comet's approach. Olympus Mons isn't holding its breath. Valles Marineris isn't bracing for impact. The planet has been hit, frozen, stripped, and cracked countless times before, and it wears each event like another layer of dust. Historians still argue whether Mars once had a chance at being Earth-like with seas and storms, or whether it was doomed to dryness from the start. But the silence doesn't argue back. It just keeps existing quietly, stubbornly, without complaint. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 1976, when Viking 1 first sent photos from Mars's surface, some people swore they could see artificial structures, walls, even a face. For a moment, the silence seemed broken, as if Mars had been waiting to reveal a secret. Later, sharper images showed nothing but rocks and shadows. No faces, no voices, just the planet shrugging off our projections. You kick at the soil with your boot and watch the dust float lazily. Even that motion makes no sound. On Earth, dust motes swirl in air currents, humming with static, buzzing in sunlight. Here they rise and fall like tired feathers, carried only by the gentlest hint of a breeze. If Atlas were to smash into the surface, Mars wouldn't cry out. It wouldn't scream. It would just absorb the blow and go on in silence, leaving another crater to join the chorus of scars. You smirk at yourself. Humans love drama, but planets don't. You imagine Mars rolling its eyes at all the speculation, muttering, "Honestly, I've been hit by worse." Historians still argue whether craters are best studied as geological data or as history books of violence, but to Mars they're neither. They're just there. The patient silence presses on you until you feel small, almost embarrassed for projecting fear and hope onto a world that doesn't return the gesture. Mars doesn't wait. Mars doesn't wish. Mars just is, and maybe that's what unsettles you most. The calm acceptance of a planet that has already endured everything you're afraid of. The comet continues its green glide, unhurried, while Mars watches without watching, quiet as always. The silence hangs so heavy now that you almost forget to breathe. You stand under the emerald streak of Atlas and feel yourself shrinking, as if the whole universe is leaning in to remind you. You are tiny. Your tiny place in scale, set against the vast mechanics of gravity, is humbling in a way no bedtime story really prepares you for. Look at the numbers. The Sun weighs 330,000 times more than Earth. Jupiter, with its bulk, tugs comets like toys in a bathtub, slingshotting them into new paths without effort. Even Atlas, which feels enormous in your imagination, is just a frozen speck compared to planets, stars, galaxies. Historians still argue whether human culture has truly absorbed these scales, or if we just pretend, repeating the numbers like mantras without ever grasping the immensity. Here's a quirky tidbit. When the Voyager spacecraft took the famous pale blue dot photo in 1990, Earth appeared as a pixel less than a millimeter wide on the image. Carl Sagan called it a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. People wept, inspired, unsettled, overwhelmed. And that was just Earth. Mars, this planet under your boots, would have been even tinier in the same frame, another mote drifting in the dark. You imagine floating above it all, watching Atlas move not in hours or days but in centuries. The comet doesn't care about your sense of time. It drifts according to equations so vast they feel like fate. Mars spins, Earth spins, gravity nudges, and your whole life is barely a flicker in the rhythm. Historians still argue whether awareness of cosmic scale makes people nihilistic or inspired. Some freeze at the thought that nothing we do matters compared to galaxies colliding. Others find comfort in the perspective that our worries shrink when measured against the universe. You find yourself caught between both moods, a smirk at your own insignificance, a shiver at the beauty of it all. Your boots feel heavier in the dust, not because gravity changed, but because perspective did. Atlas glows above, a reminder of how small you are, how fleeting. And yet, here you are, watching, narrating, imagining. Maybe that's humanity's odd gift. Even as tiny players, we notice the game. The comet keeps sliding across the void, and you breathe in slowly, letting the weight of scale settle into your chest like a blanket you didn't know you needed. The silence of Mars stretches like a lullaby now, and the green smear of Atlas above you doesn't feel threatening anymore. It feels distant, softened, like a nightlight left on in the hallway. You've walked through the craters, dust storms, cafe debates, memes and myths, and yet the comet itself hasn't changed. It's still just drifting, icy and indifferent, while your mind does all the storytelling. A calm return to bed, that's what this is. The theory of doom remains unresolved, but the weight of it has already begun to lift. You picture the comet one last time, tracing its luminous trail past Mars. Maybe it brushes the atmosphere. Maybe it sails harmlessly by. Maybe it carves a scar no one will see for centuries. The possibilities scatter like sand in the Martian wind, and none of them belong to you. That's the quiet truth. You're not the author of cosmic events, just a reader, drifting along the margins of the universe's book. Historians still argue whether comets should be remembered more as threats or as muses, harbingers of extinction or sparks of imagination. They'll keep arguing long after Atlas is gone, and long after you've fallen asleep tonight. Meanwhile, Mars will remain silent, Earth will keep spinning, and the comet will fade into memory. Here's your quirky tidbit for the road. In medieval Europe, some monks drew comets in manuscripts with little demon faces attached to their tails, as if they were literal monsters streaking across the sky. You smile, because that's exactly what you've done tonight. Given the comet a face, a personality, a role in your bedtime story. And like any good monster, it shrinks once the lights go out. So you take a breath. The Martian dust beneath your boots fades into the weight of your blankets. The comet's glow softens into the dim light of your room. The cosmic dread ebbs, replaced by something gentler, the sense that even when the universe rolls its dice, you can still rest. The sky above stays vast, unbothered, infinite, and you, tiny, tired, drifting, finally let yourself close your eyes. The night slows as if the universe itself wants you to rest. The comet drifts farther from your mind, its glow softening into a harmless memory. The Martian landscape you've walked across dissolves gently, its silence becoming the hush of your own room. Your breaths lengthen, steady and slow, like waves brushing the shore of a very quiet sea. Nothing urgent waits here. The comet has passed for now, and the dust has settled. Whatever debates and worries follow it back on Earth are distant echoes, too faint to reach you. All that matters is the calm weight of your body against the bed, the soft rhythm of your breathing, the way the air feels still and safe. Even the images that linger, the red skies, the green glow, the silent rovers, are softened now, turned into dream fragments that float harmlessly through your thoughts. They're not warnings anymore. They're gentle reminders that the universe is vast, that time is long, and that you are allowed to rest within it. Let your shoulders sink. Let your jaw unclench. Imagine yourself wrapped in the same patient silence that Mars wears so easily, a blanket woven of stillness and starlight. The comet drifts on, and so can you, deeper and deeper into rest. Sleep comes like a tide, unhurried and certain. Trust it. Trust that the skies will keep turning, the planets will keep spinning, and the universe will keep whispering stories you don't have to solve tonight. All you need to do is let go, close your eyes, and drift quietly into dreams.